You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
Welcome back to the Asians in Hockey podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Nate Nikau. Last offseason, I officially launched a website for the show, asiansinhockey.com. Over there, you can listen to the podcast directly in your browser, check out links to some collected resources, such as the Asian Hockey Card Collection, curated by our contributing producer, Chris Wu, and the online periodical Hockey in Society, edited by friend of the show, Courtney Cito. You can also write a review of the show on the website, as well as leave me a voice note. And if you're interested in dropping me a line, I would love to hear from you. Now, speaking of voice notes, I'm looking to collect sound bites from Asian hockey fans talking about their favorite teams. So if you're interested in sharing your story with me, please feel free to record a voice note on the website. I just might feature your story in an upcoming episode. I will be adding more stuff to the website over the course of the coming season, so be sure to visit often. Once again, you can find the site at www.asiansinhockey.com. Before we drop the puck on today's episode, I've got a couple favors to ask of you. First off, if you'd like to help out with some of the production and operating costs, you can do that through buymeacoffee.com. Just visit coffee/AsiansInHockey, that's coff.ee/AsiansInHockey to make a donation. Now, to reiterate, I promise to never charge a subscription fee for the podcast, and I'm just grateful to you for simply listening to the show. Second, if you've enjoyed what you've heard from us, I would love it if you could post a quick 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This is honestly the best way to get the word out about the show and help us cultivate our audience. So thank you so much for your support. On today's episode, I'll be talking with Allan Chan, a former member of the Winnipeg Jets Advisory Council and a dedicated ambassador for the Jets' First Shift program, where he helps kids from Asian, South Asian, and Filipino backgrounds get their first taste of hockey. Allan is also the founder and GM of the Winnipeg Emperors, an all-Asian hockey team in Manitoba's capital region that's committed to representation and community on the ice. On top of that, he's the driving force behind the Lunar New Year hockey tournament, an incredible event that celebrates culture through sport. I'll also be taking a look at a few key players in the NHL and how things are looking for them in the first quarter of the season so far. All of that is coming up right after this.
Hungry for spicy food and even hotter conversations? Craving community and authentic storytelling? Then join the table. This is Minor Legends, a new comedy fiction podcast supported by Potluck. Pull up every week with me, Angela Wong-Carbone, and follow the stories of me and my friends as we serve up tasty tales of what it means to be Asian American at our weekly dinner hang. If you enjoy deep dishing on absurd stereotypes like tiger moms who tutor your dating game rather than grades, the insanity of your parents' immigration story, to the legend of that one good Asian cousin you can never live up to, then pull up a seat and grab a plate. Featuring dinner guests like Ronnie Chang, Brian Park, Usama Siddiqui, Celia Au, Perry Young, Supriya Ganesh, and more. It's a tasty rotation that'll leave you belly laughing and steeped in relatable and spicy conversations. Can you take the heat? Listen now for free wherever you get your podcasts.
And welcome back to the show. Happy American Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrates and to everyone who boycotts either version of this holiday on the second Monday of October or the fourth Thursday in November. In solidarity with Native Americans and the First Nations of Canada, I see you and I appreciate you. For my part, I do want to mention that where I'm recording this episode is on the lands of the Mohican people of the Lenape Nation. I won't dive into too much detail, but I do think it's worth acknowledging that the history of our favorite sport has been lost to the Eurocentricity of settler colonialist narratives. So I want to read a brief excerpt from a piece about the origins of Canadian hockey, I'll link to the whole thing in today's show notes. For all the writing and talk devoted to debating hockey's origins, we may be missing a critical piece of the history, obscured by settler colonialism: Indigenous presence on the land and its role in the development of Canadian sport. The settler colonizers, in Wolfe's oft-quoted maxim, come to stay. Invasion is structure, not an event. If we accepted this point, if we confronted the limitations of the dominant settler colonial perspective and approached the whole question through a broader Indigenous lens, such as that of the Mi'kmaq people, how might our conceptions of hockey's origins change? From that vantage point, the origin and evolution of the game begins to look more like a dynamic process of cultural exchange and transformation. It involves stepping back and practicing what the Mi'kmaq call two-eyed seeing. This is, according to Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall, when we learn to see from one eye with Indigenous knowledge and the best of Aboriginal ways of knowing, and from the other eye with the best in the Western mainstream ways of knowing, and learn to use both eyes together for the benefit of all. The game of hockey most likely began with the First Nations, the people known in the Maritime region as the Mi'kmaq, and its history is being pieced together by First Nations experts like Michael Robideau, Roger Lewis, and Bernie Francis, utilizing insights and research gleaned from an intimate knowledge of Mi'kmaq language, culture, and ways. That groundbreaking research will continue to focus on authenticating the existence of an early Indigenous form of hockey in Mi'kmaqi. The Harry Piers ethnology papers note that Dr. Jerry Lonecloud, a Mi'kmaq from Elmsdale, Nova Scotia, on October 8, 1913, described in vivid detail a traditional Mi'kmaq game called Dwarken, played on the ice. Dwarken, he recounted, means a ball played on ice. In that game, a round stone was hit on the ice by a stick, most likely a spruce root, which was called Dwarkenocht. The stone ball was hit by a striker, causing the round stone to roll along the ice and be chased down by other players. The other players tried to interfere with the stone carrier and take it from him before it was returned to the striker. The player who returned it safely was permitted to hit the ball next. The game, Lonecloud told Piers, was not played now and had been very long out of use, but the tradition apparently remained. More evidence: a little lake above Barron Lake, at the head of the Tusket River, near 9 Mile Ridge in Yarmouth or Digby County, Nova Scotia, was known as Dwarkenage, which means place where they play Dwarken. Indigenous ice games existed in Mi'kmaq society at the time of, or shortly after, first contact with Europeans. The Mi'kmaq language contains words referring to field and ice games called Uchamkunutk that eventually melded with European-influenced ice hurley to become a distinct new game called Alchamadijik. Mi'kmaq language scholar Bernie Francis confirms that the Mi'kmaq had various ways of describing the act of playing hockey, varying by their location in the region. The word Aljamatijik, for example, is believed to have originated with Mi'kmaq living in what is now New Brunswick. It translates into the phrase, "they are playing hockey." Taken together, the presence of such words and phrases testifies to the prevalence of early forms of the sport in Mi'kmaq society. I do recommend reading the whole thing. It's an eye-opening article. So again, I'll link to the full piece in today's show notes. It's worth bringing up in a conversation about this sport because as a podcast about an ethnically minoritized group in this sport, I think it's important to recognize the minoritized roots of the game that has become such a massive part of dominant white culture in North America. I do hope that you'll take the time to read about this history and maybe even learn a bit more through other media. One recommendation I have is the documentary Black Ice, along with the book that it's based on, for even more on the minoritized origins of the sport of hockey. Anyway, on to the elephant in the room. It has been a while. I do want to apologize and acknowledge the fact that I unexpectedly went silent for so long, but I've had several big and pretty challenging life events hit my wife and me in rapid succession. We're doing fine now, but between working full-time, working on my master's part-time, doctor's visits, and life just being life, I've had to set the podcast on the back burner for a little while. So today, I just want to say thank you to those of you who have offered thoughts and support through these past few months. I truly appreciate it. Anyway, let's talk hockey. So the NHL season is well underway. We're about a quarter of the way through, maybe a little more than a quarter of the way through. And there's way too much for me to catch you up on. So I'll just talk about a few key players and their performances thus far. First up, let's take a look at Zane Parekh. Zane started the season off pretty well, considering, with 5 hits so far this year and an assist against Winnipeg. He is showing some signs of struggle, and his ice time has decreased as a result, but he's played in 11 of Calgary's 24 games this season and has averaged about 15 or so minutes a game. Unfortunately, Zane sustained an upper body injury on November 17th and hasn't played since. He is set to return in a few days, so we'll certainly be keeping an eye on him. Sadly, Calgary has had a rough start to the season, sitting all the way down in last place in the Pacific Division. Keeping things out west, let's take a look at Kyler Yamamoto, who's notched 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points. He's looking okay out there in the NHL's newest market, the Utah Mammoth, but the fact that he's stuck in a bottom 6 role severely limits his scoring ability. I'm hoping Yamamoto can start climbing his way up the pecking order in Utah, and as of the time I'm recording this, it is looking like he'll be on the Mammoth's second line with Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley, which should help bolster his numbers. Utah is doing well in their second season, sitting in 4th place in the Central Division after 23 games played. Next up, Jason Robertson, who is absolutely lighting things up in Texas. The Filipino phenom, the Kababayan Clapper, the Pinoy Pride, recently broke Dallas's goal-scoring streak record previously held by Mike Modano. Robertson passed Modano on November 25th with a goal in his 7th straight game. He's also on an 8-game point streak. Robertson also recently notched the 7th hat trick of his career in a 5-1 blowout against Philadelphia on November 15th. Robertson has 14 goals and 17 assists for 31 points this season so far, leading his team in goals and points. The Stars are currently in 2nd place in the Central Division after 23 games played. And the last NHL player I want to look at today is, of course, our captain, Nick Suzuki. Suzuki is having a little bit of an off year so far, but when an off year looks like 5 goals and 18 assists for 23 points over 21 games, I think I'll take it. He's been a bit quieter than usual on the goal scoring front, but with just over a point per game, he's still keeping things going up front. He's currently leading his team in points and assists, which makes complete sense when you're centering on the top line consisting of Juraj Slafkovsky and Montreal's leading goal scorer, Cole Caulfield. The Habs came out of the gate firing on all cylinders, but after a few injuries to key players, their streak has slowed down a bit and they've fallen to 5th place in the Atlantic Division after 21 games played. That does it for the NHL today. I won't really take a more in-depth look than that because I don't have a whole lot of time. We'll switch over to the PWHL, whose season is just getting underway at the time I'm recording this. We are smack dab in the middle of PWHL opening week, so there isn't a whole lot to report right now. Nicole Gosling has put in some decent ice time in her first couple games for the Montreal Victoire, and Katie Chan is just getting started with a first appearance for the brand new Vancouver Golden Eyes. Well, that wraps up our player update today. After the break, I'm speaking with Allan Chan, founder and GM of the Winnipeg Emperors, an all-Asian hockey team in the Manitoba Capital Region. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Charlene Kay. I'm a musician, songwriter, and guitarist. Growing up, I loved music. Whether it was pop, acoustic, emo, I ate it all up. But as a Chinese-American kid living in Scottsdale, Arizona, I also felt isolated, never really seeing artists who looked like me or shared my experiences. So, after years of performing on stages all over the world, I wanted to create a space to highlight the amazing Asian musicians who I knew were out there, just not always getting played on the radio. That's why I started Golden Hour, a podcast where Asian singers, songwriters, instrumentalists, and music producers share their personal stories, and it's a space for you to discover your new favorite artist. Listen to Golden Hour with me, Charlene Kay, wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.
Welcome back to the show. For today's third period, we're joined by a true community builder, Allan Chan, who is the founder and GM of the Winnipeg Emperors, an all-Asian hockey club based in Manitoba, and is the organizer of the Lunar New Year hockey tournament. He's also a former member of the Winnipeg Jets Advisory Council and is a key ambassador for their First Shift program, where he helps East Asian, South Asian, and Southeast Asian kids get their very first taste of the game. From grassroots to big leagues, Allan has been helping to shape the future of hockey and preserving its hidden past. Allan, welcome to the Asians in Hockey podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So to get the ball rolling on our conversation, so you've worn a whole lot of hats in the hockey world. Coach, organizer, advisor, community historian. What drives your passion for making hockey more inclusive?
I think it's just my honest, pure love of the game. You know, like I would say maybe I fell in love with the game like at a later age, like around 12. And that was because I went to my first Jets game and it was an overtime, game-winning game, right? And it was so exciting. And right away I wanted to play hockey. A little bit older at that point, at 12 years old, and I lived in like the core area of Winnipeg, which is primarily kind of like like your inner city, right? So there wasn't actually even any real true hockey rinks. They were like ODRs, right? I don't know if the US calls them ODRs, outdoor rinks, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where I started to learn to play, and it was just the best. There weren't even boards at my local like ODR. Like it was nice. Just literally just a flooded ice pad, and we used our boots as goalposts, right? Like that's how rudimentary it was, and that just kind of like propelled my passion for it. And as I furthered on playing, as I got older, like I just noticed that, there weren't as many like players that were of Asian descent or of other major minorities, right? You would come across some, and through the years you would play with others. You maybe have like other like games where you see other players, and it just gave the idea that wouldn't it be nice to just kind of like have everybody together and just like do something that we all love, and just having the initial commonality of just being Asian being the first factor, and then the second commonality of just loving hockey. So that's kind of what fueled my passion for it.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the Winnipeg Jets First Shift program that's, helping kids from East Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian backgrounds get started in the game. What kind of impact have you seen firsthand from those kids' kind of early experiences on ice?
Yeah, so, to kind of like just give some background on the First Shift program, it's a program where we essentially sign up kids from all these Asian backgrounds, South Asian, Southeast Asian, right? And we give them the opportunity to essentially learn and play hockey. And there's a lot of barriers to playing hockey. The initial thing is cost and time, right? And then there's also the aspect of just being unfamiliar with the sport. It might not be the first sport that their family grew up with, right? And so we with this first ship program, we give them all the gear for free, head to toe gear for free. Then we also give them lessons of how to play hockey, and that includes maybe they don't even know how to skate, so we teach them how to skate. We teach them how to put the gear on. We teach them what gear is involved, and then we get them on the ice. And then the other big factor is then we actually have coaches of minority descent, of Asian, South Asian, Southeast Asian backgrounds, right? And so that right away breaks down a lot of uncomfortableness from the kids, right? Because right away they see somebody that is like them. It's almost like having an instant role model once they get into that room, right? And it just makes them feel more comfortable and more at ease, right? And so what we see the biggest impacts are is essentially by the end of the 6 sessions, like the kids, their confidence has grown, right? And that means just even play. The first 4 months, their confidence grows in just being able to skate and move around and just to move. And then the second is now they're confident in that they're feeling good about themselves. Now they might look at joining up with the local community center, or maybe they want to further their development with further camps. It just makes them want to continue and grow within the game, and gives them a jump start for the program and for the game of hockey.
That's really cool. It reminds me actually of a program that I coach for here in New Jersey. It's called Hockey in New Jersey, and it's very similar in that it provides equipment for free to kids who have never experienced the sport before. It's kind of aimed at the more urban environments here in New Jersey, where most families are living at a lower income level, and the hockey programs, the more established hockey programs around New Jersey, obviously, are pretty much cost prohibitive. And so it's cool to be a part of a program where kids who would otherwise never have the opportunity to play the sport get a chance to, and often from various underrepresented racial and ethnic communities, which is really cool. And to have coaches who are of different ethnicities on the ice, like you were saying, instant role models for kids who wouldn't necessarily see themselves in this sport. As we've talked about on this podcast in the past, it's a sport that is unfortunately pretty embedded in whiteness, and to have its deep roots kind of exposed, deep roots within Indigenous and Black communities kind of exposed and coming to the surface is really important, and I think really powerful for people who haven't seen themselves in the sport. So it's really cool to see other people involved in the sport in this way, and helping to get kids started. So as we mentioned earlier, you also served on the Jets Advisory Council. What were some of the things you were pushing for while you were in that role, and how do you feel the organization grew as a result of your work there?
Yeah, I think that the two main things I wanted to push while I was serving on there was, one, the Grow the Game initiative, and we accomplished that with that first ship program, right? Before we even had the first ship program, what we did was we actually gathered kids from Asian descent and all these different backgrounds, and we actually kind of had like a camp, a showcase to see what kind of kids that we had in the city, right? And then from there, we saw kids that we could invite back to help us coach in the first ship program, right? Because that really just helped a lot, right? So in terms of as I mentioned, we have coaches that are from all these different backgrounds, and instantly gives them role models. And then also the language barrier, right? So maybe English isn't their first language, and then to have these players that that we identified to come in and be able to help and to even speak their own language, it just really did grow the game, right? There's the Jets had also done research, and they know that that the population of Winnipeg in itself is changing, and so they knew that in order for the future, for the growth of the game, they had to reach out to these areas, right? And so that's where myself and my good friend Gunny Man, we partnered together and we helped grow the game within the Jets Advisory Council. And the second piece was their heritage games, right? So Gunny was responsible for the South Asian Heritage Night, and then I was tapped on the shoulder to help with the Lunar New Year game, right? So and the Jets didn't want to come off as just doing this kind of hopping in, hopping out, and trying to make a dollar on the community. They were very authentic, in terms of like they were genuine and want to engage the community, right? So they wanted to make sure that they did the right things, right? So be it from like giveaways, we handed out red lucky pockets. As something that's symbolic, right? Even something as small as like when we were displaying dragons like on the ice surface, right? Because it was Lunar New Year, they want to make sure we had the right one. So like we had to make sure like the dragons had 4 claws as opposed to 3 claws, because it was just symbolic of like the Chinese culture, right? So just kind of like essentially just advising them on those factors of how we're going to do things right and do it the right way. Like they just they weren't looking to just do it quick and easy. They wanted to get it right. So that's where we came in.
That's pretty cool. So let's switch over a little bit specifically to talk about Asian culture in the sport of hockey and the work that you're doing now with the Winnipeg Emperors. So this is an all Asian hockey club. Tell us a little bit about how this club came about, what inspired you to create this club, and then what makes it different from some of the other teams in the region, aside from, of course, the fact that it's all Asian.
Yeah, I think it really started at around 2010. I was playing and I saw this advertised tournament in Toronto called the Asian Hockey Championships. Never heard of it. Myself and 2 other friends, we decided to go. We participated in it, and we were completely blown away at how big this tournament was and how many players were and how good a lot of these players actually were, right? And so we came back and we were really excited that we have to put together a team, because we had gone in and participated as solo registrants, right? And essentially got put on other teams that the tournament was very happy to oblige and help us with, right? So we came back. Now it's 2011. The Jets had just returned back to Winnipeg. Hockey has just gone bananas in the city, right? Everybody's wanting to play. And then word kind of got out that we were starting a team to send to this Asian Hockey Championships. And it was called, we decided to call it the Winnipeg Emperors, right? We talked about it and we thought, we could like have fun and just, put together like, a beer league type name. But we want to actually really represent the Asian culture and the city of Winnipeg, which is why we call ourselves the Winnipeg Emperors. And so, we went 2011. It was a great time. We didn't have the results that we wanted. Fast forward now to 2012, 2013, actually. Okay. Hockey had gone so big in Winnipeg and so many players had become interested that we actually sent 3 teams to this Asian Hockey Championships, and we just divided into squad A, B, and C just based on the skill levels of our teams, right? And so, that year, that many teams, like that was essentially 45 players that we went down to, and we competed and we won in the intermediate division for our squad A, right? And that just kind of like cemented like we were doing something that was really good. It was the bridging of the commonality first of being Asian first, right? And then the second of just like, having a love for the game and wanting to compete and do something a little bit more. So in terms of what's different between us and like the other teams in the region is that all of our players primarily like can come from different skill levels. They might have played, semi-pro, junior, right? Okay. Or they could just be, your initial recreation beer league skater, right? Okay. And so they all play on different backgrounds, and maybe they play on different teams. Maybe they still play on different teams. And what it is with the club, we know every year we set, the tournament as our goal of when we're getting together. So throughout the year, we get together, all the players on the squads, we get together, we play other teams in the area. Not necessarily, they don't have to be Asian, just other teams, right? For the goal of just getting ready and playing. It's kind of like, I guess you would say, you know, like Wu-Tang would say, it's like we're kind of like just forming Voltron. We all come from different areas, and you know, and so we get together and we want to just compete and be together and share in this camaraderie and this brotherhood of being Asian, being from Winnipeg, and wanting to compete and just do well.
Yeah, that's really cool. So your club's motto is United in Diversity. How does this philosophy show up in how the Emperors play, recruit, how you build community?
Yeah, I think, you know, we don't turn anybody away. If you want to be a part of Emperors, like, we're going to find a way to make it work, right? You know, as I alluded earlier, depending on your skill level, we'll find a squad, you know, to make it work so that we can all participate in the game, right? So we welcome everybody. Essentially, like, you know, like, you don't have to be from like of Asian descent. The rules of the tournament are that, you know, you're allowed 2 non-Asian players, which they call imports, right?
Okay.
So we do let, you know, people, as they're coming, that want to play and they're of non-Asian descent, we do let them know that we only have a 2 import rule. So we're going to take the 2 guys that are going to be the best fit for the team, right? But the rest, like, you know, pretty much open up to everyone. And in terms of building community, you know, like, you know, a lot of them are now part of this first ship program as coaches, and they all want to give back, right? Because you know, at some point they were growing up and they were maybe like the only non-white kid that was playing on their hockey team, and they know exactly what it felt like, and they knew like kind of the hardships that their parents went through in order to put them on the ice. So now they're doing their part in building the community. You know, it's really good. Like, you know, it's just it gives everybody a sense of pride. You know, I had one of our, you know, earliest players who's still with the team. He says, you know, like, every year when he goes to Toronto, like, that's his Stanley Cup. That's the pinnacle of his hockey career, is playing in the hockey championships for the Winnipeg Emperors. And it's just great because, you know, when we go to Toronto, that city, you know, is so diverse, right? And so multicultural, that when we go to Toronto, Toronto has great, you know, attractions and whatnot, but also it's pretty good in terms of like the Asian culture of like food and sights to see in that respect, right? And so that's why, you know, we keep going back. You know, every year it's like, it's not even a question. It's just like, how many are we taking, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, you know, you had mentioned the Asian Hockey Championships, the Lunar New Year tournament. What is it like to bring so many Asian players together on the ice for those events? I know you kind of alluded to that a little bit in some of the previous answers, but I guess more pointedly, what are some of the emotions that you or some of your friends, colleagues, teammates feel or express when you get to be on the ice with just so many players that look like you?
I think it's just it's a sense of, you know, first and foremost, of just belonging, right? You feel like you found a home, right? You feel like you're there, and that, you know, all that matters at that point is like, it's just kind of like the hockey, because everybody's the same. Everybody just loves the same thing. Everybody looks and talks the same way, right? And just a gathering, when you get that many people together and they're just sharing a love for something that they all already love, it just fosters like communication and joy and just bringing people together. You know, like social media and things like that, you know, everybody's kind of like, oh, by themselves. You know, you might be part of a community, but when you get people face to face doing the same thing that they love, you know, you don't get too much of like the, you know, the smack talk, or like kind of like, you know, the trash talk, you know, there's trash talk on ice, which is different, but like, it's just when you get people in the same room or on ice together and they all love the same thing, like they're just happy to be there. You know, when we do the tournament, you know, the amount of like, you know, happiness and joy that and feedback that I get from players just further cements that what we're doing is a good thing, and it's just bringing people together. It's just what it is.
Well, that's powerful. So I guess kind of building off of that, do you have any maybe favorite moments specifically from one of those tournaments that you feel kind of exemplifies what all of this work is about?
Yeah, maybe it was 2018. We were playing Ottawa in the finals, and it was a good game. We ended up winning, and we actually won the championship. And then at the end of that game, one of our players, as we were celebrating on ice with his girlfriend, proposed to her on ice, right? During the championship photos. She said yes. And then, the Ottawa team, who we had just battled for a hard final, was just also, happy for us and just, they want to celebrate in the moment, right? And it was just, and that's what it is just kind of like, in the game of sport, we were enemies, and then also in the game of hockey, you were enemies on the ice, but then it was after it's all said and done, there's just nothing but respect, and that to me kind of like just, I don't know, it was just a great moment, right, to showcase, the brotherhood of all the players that are in this tournament, who love playing this tournament for all the right reasons, right? So that was, one of the best moments. Another moment I can think of actually is just essentially the first draft that we had for the Lunar New Year tournament, and just kind of rewind. So Lunar New Year tournament is a tournament that we do in Winnipeg that has now going into its fourth year. Okay. And what we do in it is that we keep everybody at a friendly level playing field by having the teams be drafted, right? So every team is drafted at the draft, and the first year that we did the draft, there was just so much excitement and so much happiness in celebrating, this tournament, essentially creating our own Asian Hockey Championship locally, right? We however don't have like an import rule, and we actually just welcomed everyone. So although it's the Lunar New Year tournament, and I think most people would expect that a lot of players are of Asian descent, it's open to everyone. The only caveat being that, like, you just can't be, a dirty player, right? Somebody that just plays clean hockey and is out to have a good time and is, accepting of all cultures and players, right? So when we did that draft, that was just a beautiful thing to see so many people that were there just enjoying a good time and knowing that they were going to be playing some good competitive hockey with just some good people and celebrating the Lunar New Year at the same time.
Very cool. So let's transition a little bit to talking a bit about the legacy of Asians in hockey, some of your advocacy work, and maybe a little eye to the future. So as a community storyteller, you've brought some pretty incredible stories of Chinese Canadians in hockey to light. How have these stories influenced your approach to building community in the sport today? Is there anything that off the top of your head you want to mention specifically as far as a story of Chinese Canadians in the sport? And then again, just to retell my last question, how have these stories influenced your approach to the community building aspect of your work?
Yeah, I think it's just, for me, it's just being proud of my own background and also wanting to share that there are others like me and there are others like you, and showing other Chinese-born Canadians or Asian Canadians that you're not alone, and that we want to be able to tell our story too, right? And that in itself, I think, helps break down a lot of barriers. And if anything, it really just shows kids that there are others like you, and these are people you can look up to. You don't have to be alone in going through this process of playing hockey. And sometimes, when you're in a community that doesn't have a lot of minorities playing the game, you do feel that way. Yeah. You do feel a little bit signaled out. And so, that's why I want to highlight these stories, right? To give people, especially the little kids out there, I think of my own son growing up. Like, I wanted to give him every opportunity to like know that he's not the only one, and that he should be proud of his background, and never to like think twice about it, and then to carve his own path, right? And I think going forward in the next 5 to 10 years, I think there have always been players of Asian descent. Me being a little bit biased, being a Chinese-born Canadian, like I'm waiting for that, like Chinese player to kind of break through, and I think it's coming. It's pretty close, right?
Yeah.
You look at the last 2 years of the NHL draft with like Kevin He and Simon Wang, right? Like those are two players who are just we're on the cusp of being in the first round, right? And they're fantastic players, and it's coming. And I've actually feel like I've seen it in the last 5 years myself, seen a lot of kids who were actually like born in China, who have come over and are essentially playing hockey in Canada now, and playing at a very, very high level, right? And they're playing juniors, they're playing AAA, and then juniors, and then getting drafted, like how we're seeing with Kevin and Simon. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see that full Chinese player in the pro leagues, right? There's been a lot of other players, of like half Asian descent who have like hit that pinnacle. But you think back, Jim Pack, like you think of Larry Kwong, right? But now there seems to be there's going to be, it feels like it's very close to being a turning point where you're going to see a very high end player who's going to be breaking through soon.
Yeah, and that's an exciting prospect for the next few years to keep our eye on. So speaking of the next 5 to 10 years, I am curious to get your thoughts on what you think might still be missing from the conversation at the national level, or thinking of the NHL, like at the continental level, in North America. What's something that you wish people were discussing or talking about or bringing to light?
I think there just should be recognition, maybe from the NHL, of these past players of Larry Kwong. I think that should be one that should actually be more highlighted and talked about. But I think going back to it, when the Olympics were in China, the NHL did a pretty good job of like highlighting the game in that country, right? And I think though after essentially the Olympics were done, it just stopped. Right. And it's kind of like, why did it stop? Just because we're not doing the Olympics there anymore? Like, we should still continue to grow the game in other communities, and just to make the game better. Right. And I think the NHL needs to kind of go back to that and reach out to these communities, and not necessarily even other countries, but even within North America, right? To these newcomers, put out more information on the rules of the game, the intricacies of the game. CBC in Canada does a good job of actually airing Hockey Night in Canada in different languages, and I think that's a great start. But it's not very easily accessible. You have to really kind of dig and search for it. And I think the National Hockey League in itself, and the PWHL should really take a stronger approach to trying to market to these communities, and give them an intro crash course to these communities of like about hockey, right? And I think you'll see strong dividends from that.
I think that actually answers my my next question, but maybe to kind of put it a little bit more pointedly, what would you like to see as a first step, or maybe the one change, whether from Canadian hockey writ large, American hockey, elite professional leagues like the NHL and PWHL, or even local association, that would make hockey more accessible and welcoming to kids and even adults who look like us?
I think first and foremost, having put my son through hockey himself, like a lot of hockey, information on how to get started is hard to kind of gather that information. Almost sometimes like it's actually guarded, right? In terms of what your first steps should be, right? And I think there needs to be kind of like a definitive and authoritative guide, like, like one starting point where everybody points you to, like, this is where you need to start, how you need to start, what kind of gear you need, and to do a job that way. And then, in all your marketing material, include kids, right, of different backgrounds, genders, everything, right? So that all the kids see, that I can play that. Look at this kid. He looks exactly like me. I can play that. And I think that's the biggest start. It's the initial, perception of the game of hockey as being essentially known as a white sport. You need to break that down, right? So highlight, your different players of different backgrounds within the game, right? And use them as stars. You can do Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl as your, mega superstars, because they are mega superstars. But don't forget players like Jason Robertson, players of the past like Korea, like use them, right? And have them help grow the game that way.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, I noticed that Jason Robertson has been doing a lot and leaning into his heritage. And that's pretty cool to see. And even highlighting, we talk a lot on the show about Nick Suzuki. I'm a Habs fan, so it happens a lot. But even though Nick Suzuki doesn't necessarily talk about his racial background, just even seeing him in promotional materials and having him
just seeing his name, seeing his appearance, it goes a long way. You don't have to go on and be full and be like, hey, look at me, I'm Asian, right? We can clearly see that. We can see it from your name and just the way you look. And that in itself already is enough to like entice and welcome others into the game.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Absolutely. So as we kind of bring the conversation to a close, if there's one message that you want young Asian Canadians to take with them when they lace up their skates, either for the first time or for the 50th time or for the 100th time, what would it be?
It would be, you belong here. Hockey is for everyone, and your presence on the ice matters. It's about celebrating who you are, your culture, your story, all while being part of a team that values respect, resilience, and community. Don't let stereotypes define you or your path in the game, but bring your full self, play with pride, and know that you're helping shape a more inclusive hockey in Canada. Wow, that was great. Thank you so much for that. I'll put all of the links in the show notes, but is there anything that you would like to plug? If you're driving and you're listening to this, please do not go digging around, clicking in the show notes for links. So we'll talk about, just what it is that you want to share here. Also, where can people find you and your work online? Yeah, so our easiest, for the Winnipeg Emperors, just search on Facebook, Winnipeg Emperors. It's a group page, and you can keep up with what's going on there. And we talk about the Lunar New Year tournament there, so if you're interested in that. And we welcome players. If you're from anywhere in the world and you want to play in the Lunar New Year tournament, which is in the last weekend of February, just send us a note. We're more than happy to welcome you. And we'll find a spot for you, because we do a draft and everybody finds a spot on a team, right? And so it's a great time. Personally, you want to keep up with my life in terms of hockey. There's also a lot of car and food content on there, so just be prepared for that, because those are like the three driving factors in my life: is hockey, food, and cars, right? So you can find me on Instagram. It's Grandmaster Chan, and that's not master as in MASTER, but MASTAH Chan, CHN. So Grandmaster Chan. And that's because somebody poached and took Grandmaster Chan before I could take it. So that's why.
So you had to get creative.
I did.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I'll drop links in the show notes, like I said, for anybody who's listening and is not behind the wheel of a car. Otherwise, go check them out for yourself when you are stationary. Allan, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the show today. Obviously, we'll be in touch, and we look forward to seeing what else hockey has in store for you and what else you have in store for the sport of hockey.
Thank you very much.
That's it for today's episode. Be sure to tune in next time when I'll be speaking with Paris O'Brien, a U Sports player for Wilfrid Laurier University and goaltender for Team China's 2022 Olympic ice hockey team. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app or swing by asiansinhockey.com to find a list of apps we're available on so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for listening. Asians in Hockey is a part of the Potluck Podcast Collective and is hosted and produced by Nate Nikau. Contributing producers are Chad Soon and Chris Wu. If you like what you've heard, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and share this podcast with your friends. To keep up with us on socials, follow us on Instagram and Threads at Asians in Hockey and on Blue Sky at asiansinhockey.com. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/asiansinhockey. Please feel free to shoot me an email at asiansinhockey@gmail.com, and don't forget to visit asiansinhockey.com for more great content. See you next time on the Asians in Hockey podcast.